I'm Marion Keene. I've studied, taught, and written about Hitchcock's films for a long time, and I'll be your guide to the 39 steps. Hitchcock started directing movies in 1922. Throughout his career, Hitchcock sought complete control over his projects. He wanted to control the scripts, the stars, the assistants who would work with him, the exact places cuts would go, and even promotional material. Hitchcock lacked this kind of control over his work in his earliest years, so in 1933 he moved to British Gaumont Pictures and produced some of his best work. In 1934, Hitchcock made The Man Who Knew Too Much. A sign of the importance of this period in Hitchcock's work can be seen in the fact that he returned to it in the late 1950s, when he was so clearly a master of the art of film, and revised The Man Who Knew Too Much directly, and can be understood to echo the 39 steps in the great North by Northwest. One of the great things about the 39 steps is that it's full of Hitchcockian gestures, compositions, framings, camera movements, characters, and themes. The opening scene places us in a music hall and introduces us to two major characters, Hannay, played by Robert Donat, and Mr. Memory. At the end of the scene, we're going to meet a third important character, Annabella Smith. Much of this scene turns on the fact that the camera works in sync with the orchestra and emphasizes our introduction to the musical theme of the film. Immediately after we hear the tune, Mr. Memory appears on stage. The show, Memory's show and Hitchcock's show, has begun. It's almost as if Hitchcock and the orchestra and Memory have been waiting for Hannay, the tall stranger the camera follows into the theater in the opening, to enter the theater so the show can start.
New facts, and remembers every one of them.
The first indication we have that this opening scene has a mysterious element is the profile shot framing of Mr. Memory, with the MC in the background of the frame. The stage lights are prominent in this framing, and profile shots, such as this one coming up, in which Memory nods and bows formally to the camera, are among the most important Hitchcockian framings. Here, Hitchcock frames Memory in profile, and he raises a question about Memory. Having this framing coincide with the announcement that Mr. Memory has left his brain to the British Museum is a serious note in this film. With characteristic irony, Hitchcock will allow that for certain members of the audience, such a remark will be mocked and laughed at. But Hitchcock's camera is not laughing. Hitchcock's camera is actually showing us that Memory is marked for death.
What won the Derby in 1921? Mr. Jack Jones, humorist, with Steve Donegal, won a length at the odds of 6 to 1. Second and third, Craig and Aaron and Lemonora. Am I right, sir? Right.
Also framed in profile, the leading man, Hannay, tries to ask a question.
How far is Winnipeg from Montreal?
What won the cup in 1926?
Cup, Waterloo, football, or tea, sir?
Football, silly.
Chelsea win it. 63 BC in the presence of the Emperor Nero. What causes flipping poultry?
The audience continues to tease Memory and have some fun with him.
How many races did Mick the Miller win? How old is my West? When was Crippen hanged?
Who was the last British heavyweight champion of the world?
Henry VIII. My old woman. Bob Fitzsimmons. He defeated Jim Corbett, heavyweight champion of America, at Carson City, Nevada.
From the comical little man who repeatedly asks the same question about what causes pip in poultry, the camera is going to reframe very quickly to frame Hannay frontally as he asks his question again.
What causes pip in poultry?
How far is Winnipeg from Montreal?
Miss with you, sir.
When the camera adopts a position behind Mr. Memory and views Hannay from the stage, Hannay's involvement with the theatrical elements of the 39 steps is announced. You could say that Memory's recognition of Hannay is Hannay's formal entrance into the world of the film. Now the mood of the opening changes suddenly, and a fight breaks out for reasons we never completely understand. The camera leaves the stage, leaves Hannay, and reframes as a policeman hurries to break up the fray. Memory, soon, we'll see in a shot, tries hard to control the action, but he's helpless. We cut back to the fight. The camera's involvement with this fight is enigmatic, and the camera has so far asserted itself very little in this scene. Soon we're going to view a close-up of a woman's hand with a gun. This quick, dramatic shot brings the fight to an end and starts a mad rush out of the theater. But the important thing about the shot of the gun is that when we see it, we don't know that it's Annabella's hand and gun. And the other important thing about this shot is that it reveals to us that Hitchcock knows that this other performance, this other drama, this other play, coexists with Memory's jovial, bantering performance. As Memory's tune comes up again, we can see that Hitchcock has revealed melodrama underlies comedy and linked the two genres in one scene. The most important shot in the next sequence is the high-angle medium shot right here of Annabella and Hannah finding themselves in an embrace as the crowd rushes to exit. The high-angle shot in Hitchcock always contains an announcement of fate or doom. Through this one shot, the music hall scene culminates in the fated meeting of Annabella and Hannah and joins their fates, their lives, and their possible deaths. For all the rowdy fun of the music hall scene, the scene has an aspect of ominousness. Pay attention to what Hannah says to Annabella Smith. It's your funeral if she comes home with him. Unfortunately, it's a true prophecy and not just a joke. As Hannah and Annabella enter the Portland Place apartment building, the mood of the film has now become mysterious. What's going to happen between these two people? Since fate has brought them together, or we could also say, since Hitchcock's authorship has brought them together, are they going to fall in love? Are they going to make love? What's going on? Hannah's apartment is also a lot more mysterious than we might expect. Even though we know he's from Canada and visiting England, we couldn't possibly expect this sheet-covered and strangely barren apartment. What world is this? And who is Annabella Smith? Who is she hiding from, and why? In this scene, Hannah discovers that he is now in very unusual circumstances. By the close of the scene, Hannah's life has been absorbed into a mystery, a world he didn't know existed. This theme of mistaken identity, of the wrong man, say, is recurrent in Hitchcock's work. Of the many ways to think about it, one is to think of it as a meditation on what it means to act in a film. In Hitchcock's view, to act in a film is to be taken out of your own world and circumstances and placed in another world with different circumstances. In particular, it is to be placed in a world with a camera in it and with Hitchcock in charge. When Hitchcock's films focus on the theme of mistaken identity, or as in this case, of being singled out randomly for incorporation or suffering the experience of inhabiting the world of a Hitchcock film, consider Marion Crane in Psycho. What we learn is that we can't take for granted that our lives won't change, or that we're in complete control of our destinies and circumstances. Hitchcock's films are about human fatedness and human limitations. In this sense, the high-angle shot, for example, does not only reveal the fatedness of human beings in the frame. High-angle shots also reveal Hitchcock's presence behind the camera and authoring of the film.
Thank you. I owe you an explanation.
Well, don't bother about me. I'm nobody.
We cannot talk here.
The conversation between Annabella and Hannah in his apartment has one of the great forms of conversations in Hitchcock work, the shot-reverse shot structure. In this structure, the camera starts off framing two people in a single frame and then cuts within a conversation to single framings of each of them, always in Hitchcock, to reveal the dynamic of the conversation. Here, the dynamic of the conversation revolves around knowledge. Annabella knows more than Hannah, and he does not yet understand how important her knowledge will be to him. Apart from the striking composition of Annabella framed within the frame of the mirror on the mantel in the earlier moments of the sequence, the most important shot in the early portion of the sequence comes in Hanne's exchange with Annabella in the kitchen as he starts to prepare the meal of haddock.
Would you think me very troublesome if I ask for something to eat? I've had nothing all day.
Sure.
Here begins the important sequence. We'll cut to Annabella framed in a medium frontal shot as she tells Hanne that she fired those shots. And we should pay attention to when the camera cuts to a high-angle shot of Hanne.
Upset with those shots tonight?
I fired those shots.
This shot of Hanne, echoing the high-angle shot near the end of the music hall sequence, is Hitchcock's camera's way of revealing that Hanne is dwarfed in the world. We return to Annabella here, surrealistically lit against a white background and viewed in profile. The camera reframes up and to the left and locates Hanne and Annabella in the same frame. This shot begins with her announcement that Hanne doesn't understand. And in this intimate framing, Hanne tells her her story sounds like a spy story, and she confirms it.
I have no country.
Born in the balloon, eh? We'll let that go.
Annabella tells more of her story while Hanne appears, as he generally appears in the movie, to be disaffected. The camera reframes again as Annabella clutches at Hanne's arm to tell him that she is protecting a vital secret about England's defense system. Still, Hanne is disaffected, indifferent. He is still unaware that he's destined to solve this mystery. He still doesn't know that he can't escape this fate. Annabella here, in a moment, will offer Hanne a way to see for himself that she's right, that gunmen who are after her now are waiting outside.
Go and look down into the street then.
Hanne does as she asks. In a point-of-view shot, from Hanne's point of view, we see the gunmen are waiting under the streetlight. And this is the first time that the camera has appropriated Hanne's point of view. It's interesting that Hitchcock presents his point of view at this juncture when what's at stake is his belief that Annabella is telling the truth. This framing, the point of view framing, reveals a connection between Annabella and the camera. The point of view shot acts as a lesson to Hanne, taught by Hitchcock about the world Hanne really is in now. The upcoming close-up of Hanne shows us that Annabella's story has penetrated his defensiveness and skepticism. As she divulges more of the plot, Hanne's expression becomes thoughtful. He glances up and toward, but not quite into the camera. Robert Donet's acting is a study in subtlety. This shot doesn't reveal what he's thinking, but it does reveal that he's thinking. Annabella couldn't view him in that framing. She couldn't have that shot. This shot announces that the camera has a special access to Hanne.
How clever their chief is. Clever and ruthless.
Who is he? What's his name?
He has a dozen names. And he can look like 100 people. But one thing he cannot disguise.
Hitchcock is going to cut here to an extreme close-up as Annabella shows Hanne what part of the villain's little finger is missing. Again, this is a serious warning, a piece of vital information. But Hanne's mask is on again, his air of indifference, of teasing her and remaining unaffected by her dire prophecies is in place.
You're welcome to my bed. I'll get a shakedown on the couch. Anything else I can get you?
A map of Scotland.
Why Scotland?
There's a man in Scotland whom I must visit next if anything is to be done.
Are there 39 steps in Scotland by any chance?
Perhaps I'll tell you tomorrow.
When we fade into this shot, it's ominously vacant, and the sculpture seems to be pointing to the window through which someone has escaped. The innocent Hanne is wakened. In the most melodramatic moment of the film, Annabella tells him they'll get him next, coughs, and collapses on top of him a knife sticking out of her back. The next shot starts with a close-up of the ringing telephone and then reframes back to include Hannah in the frame. Hannah is no longer laughing off his predicament. Hitchcock returns to the point-of-view shot format in the next shot and presents the gunman below, now making a phone call. The point-of-view shot reprises the earlier point-of-view shot Hannah had of the men on the street. But here, Hitchcock adds a superimposed shot of Annabella repeating her dire predictions. One could say that the superimposition suggests that she is speaking from beyond the grave. One could also say that Hannah is summoning her image and recalling her words. And one could say that Hitchcock is presenting her to Hannah again. The point-of-view shot structure is sustained as Hannah glances over to Annabella and sees the map in her hand. In a shot that recalls the earlier close-up of their hands, Hannah takes the map from her. This shot is tinged with sadness, since it suggests that they could have been lovers, that there was a connection between them now gone. The shots that show Hannah reading the map continue the point-of-view shot structure. The camera is now fully engrossed in Hannah and his experience, his process of figuring out what world he inhabits. His script is this map, and he studies it. Though Annabella has circled Altna Shalak, a Hitchcockian joke is in the map, in the prominence of the word killin in the frame. Again, a ghostly hallucinatory Annabella appears superimposed on the screen and speaks directly to Hannah.
Police would not believe me any more than you did. I tell you, these men act quickly.
The scene closes out when the camera cuts to Hannah in another shot where we see clearly his intense thoughtfulness and then fades out. Now Hannah is a fugitive and on his way to Scotland, if, that is, he can make it past the gunman outside his building. With this scene, a great deal of the 39 steps changes again. From here on, the movie will concentrate on Hannah, and in particular on his ability to perform or to act. The trick of the 39 steps is that Hannah doesn't know what the script is, and he has no memorized lines or actions. He got into this thing by accident, or you could say he's been drafted into the plot of Hitchcock's movie. And however he got into it, it's going to be up to Hannah to improvise his way out. If he's going to survive, he's going to become an actor, adopt roles, respond to situations, make quick decisions, and keep thinking. These are, in fact, qualities that mark a number of Hitchcock heroes and heroines, notably Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman, Teresa Wright, and Grace Kelly. The world of the 39 steps is a lucky world, or at least luck prevails, as opposed to, say, the world of Vertigo, where luck runs out, or perhaps never existed. Luck in the world of a Hitchcock film often manifests itself as an accident, and the milkman's appearance on the screen is the first of the lucky accidents that comes Hannah's way. Hannah invents two stories, one the milkman doesn't believe, one the milkman does. The milkman's wrong about which to believe, but such, in Hitchcock's world, is the nature of human understanding, including the understanding of his films by his movie audiences.
And now I want to go home.
Well, what's preventing you?
Well, one of those men's her brother, the other's her husband. How do you see?
Why didn't you tell me before, old fella? Only wanted to be told. Trying to kid me with a lot of tales about murders and foreigners. Here, put this on. Put on my little hat. There you are.
Take the pound.
No, sir. You're welcome to it. You do the same for me one day.
This little scene is going to conclude on a very important shot, a wonderful, supremely vacant landscape that's very mysterious. All we're going to view is the horse and the milk cart in an empty street. Hannah has fled, and the world he had lived in before yesterday, when he was brought face to face with Annabella, is now no place for him to be. This scene is a transition scene, with tension conveyed by quick montages of cuts and highly angled framings of specific elements of the train's departure from the station. The upcoming shot of the policemen's feet, stopped in their tracks, fades out to one of the most mysterious series of shots in the film. Indeed, the upcoming short sequence is very surrealistic. The charwoman opens the door to Hannah's apartment and turns to the camera, her mouth open. Hitchcock fuses this shot with the train emerging from the tunnel and its sound, and closes the series with this shot of Hannah asleep in profile. We can interpret this series of shots, perhaps as Hannah's dream or nightmare, or we can interpret this series of shots as reality and understand Hannah to be unaware of the charwoman's discovery of Annabella's dead body and unaware of the terrible screams that ensue. These questions are central to Hitchcock's understanding of film. They focus us on the fact that Hitchcock's films ask us, what does a human being in the world of a Hitchcock film know? Are characters in Hitchcock's films charged with waking up to the fact that they're in the world of a Hitchcock film? No Hitchcock film can be understood seriously unless these issues are addressed. The mood of the film shifts again when the camera pulls back from Hannah and we see this little scene of the lingerie salesman discussing their wares. This is a comic set piece, a diversion at first, but it turns serious soon enough when the salesmen buy a newspaper and announce that there's been another woman murdered.
Hey, son. Speaking of English or Spanish? Hello. Well, what Bennett? There's been another woman murdered in the West End flat. What?
The camera quickly reframes to Hannah, who is alert, tense, thoughtful, and framed first in profile. The scene becomes now a shot-reverse shot sequence in which Hannah's heart sinks lower and lower as he overhears the conversation. The two salesmen's interest in the murder is a further piece of comic business. It anticipates the extraordinary conversations between Herb and Joe in Shadow of a Doubt that center on committing the perfect murder. The salesman's conversation about murder is callous. Murder to them is entertainment. Their fantasies about committing murder are appealed to when they can read about a real one, and Hitchcock's movies tell us over and over that our fantasies of committing murders are appealed to when we see his films, yet that we remain unconscious of our capacity for violence. When the newspaper is handed over to Hannah, we are in an intensely subjective sequence. And when Hitchcock sustains a subjective sequence, he's investigating film's capacity to reveal human subjectivity. Hannah here looks up and into the camera directly, and Hitchcock cuts to an extremely ominous reverse shot of the salesman wearing glasses, and then immediately back to Hannah, half hiding, half visible behind the paper. Does that salesman, if indeed he is a salesman, know who Hannah is? It turns out not to be the case, but the question is a real one. In Hitchcock's work, the camera is capable of the kind of vision we impute to the salesman in that shot. The camera can know who people are, reveal them, unmask them, and expose them. This is another subject of Hitchcock's films from the beginning to the end of his career. And indeed, one of the reasons Hitchcock's films are masterpieces of cinema is because they reflect on the nature of the camera and what a camera's gaze is. In a moment, Hannah will leave this first compartment in silence and high anxiety.
Have you heard the one about the young lady of Ongar?
I don't know, I can't remember.
Oh, you must hear that. There was a young lady of Ongar.
Once Hannah leaves the compartment, we view him in a tunnel shot framing. This is another characteristically Hitchcockian framing, and it signals anxiety, entrapment, and panic. When we return to the interior of the train, this shot functions as both a tunnel shot and soon even as a point-of-view shot, and it ends with one of the familiar close-ups of Hannah thinking. The pounding of the train wheels on the soundtrack increases our tension, and the camera sustains its connection with Hannah through point-of-view shots. Seeking escape, he spies a woman, framed within the frame, reading a book. He rushes into her compartment and enters a new role, the role of the long-lost lover. He's making this up as he goes along. Pamela's justifiably surprised. This shot of their hands suggests the violence of this encounter and maybe of all sexual encounters. She is as if handcuffed by Hannah, who grips her right wrist. Her glasses, fall from her grasp. Hannah immediately apologizes and tells her he had to do what he did, but she's furious. She doesn't believe his story, and when the police enter, she turns him in.
This is the man you want, I think.
The romance between Pamela and Hannah is at the heart of the 39 Steps. Their romance starts out on a false note, given that Hannah is performing, play-acting a role to cover himself. Pamela remains angry and bitter toward him for violating her until well into the film. Hannah makes a daring exit from the moving train, and then we cut to another interior tunnel shot that sustains the tension and anxiety of his condition and predicament in the world of the film. The sequence of tunnel shots that now show the police chasing Hannah conclude with barking dogs at the end of the train. Once the camera cuts to outside the train, it reframes and reveals Hannah hiding behind a pillar of the bridge. The extreme high-angle point-of-view shot of the pillars and scaffolding of the bridge and containing the abyss beneath Hannah is both an extraordinary climax to the train sequence and a shot that presages the memorable and meaningful high-angle shots of abysses that fill Hitchcock's films, notably Vertigo. As expressed in that high-angle shot, Hannah's predicament is precarious, possibly fatal. This highly composed shot of the bridge begins the transition to the next portion of the film. Like the conclusion of the London portion, the train segment ends on a series of shots of vacancy. Hannah is once again gone from the frame, but this time his whereabouts are more worrisome. He might have fallen to his death, into the abyss that he has now seen beneath him. The radio announcer's voice adds an ominous, somewhat inhuman element to the scene and highlights Hannah's mysterious disappearance. Like the announcer, we're looking for Hannah, too.
Last seen wearing a dark suit, but he may have obtained a change of clothing.
When we fade in on the landscape, the frame's feeling of vacancy is sustained. This is one of the shots in Hitchcock's works where film's capacity to present an inhuman aspect of the world is visible. It's visible not just because no human beings were in that first landscape. The world's inhuman face is visible in the sheerness of the landscape, the impenetrability of the earth and the sky. The Mount Rushmore sequence in North by Northwest is about this aspect of the world. The next portion of the 39 Steps is the Crofter's Cottage sequence, and it's one of the most important and special sequences in the entire film. In Margaret, whom we'll soon meet, the Crofter's wife, Hitchcock finds one of his most soulful and human characters. Unlike everyone else in the world of the film, Margaret immediately trusts Hannah. Marriage has been a continuous theme in the 39 Steps, starting in the music hall where it was presented as a relationship in which women controlled men and men wished for freedom. The second picture of marriage that appeared was in the scene with the milkman, where Hannah's tale of an adulterous liaison sparked the milkman's imagination, and the salesman on the train shuddered at the thought of their wives in old-fashioned and unsexy lingerie. But no image of marriage in this film prepares us for Margaret, a woman who dreams, simply and innocently, of another and more glamorous life, but who is the victim of an abusive, controlling husband. The Crofter's mentality is summed up in his penetrating, vindictive, judgmental gaze through the window at Margaret and Hannah anxiously talking to one another. Hitchcock makes it clear that the Crofter's jealousy stems from impotence.
Go in with the gentleman. He'll stay with us till tomorrow morning.
Your daughter?
My wife.
Will you no come in?
Thank you.
As Margaret prepares dinner, we view a conversation in which, for the most part, Hannah and Margaret share the frame. Hannah is preoccupied, shortly, in reading the newspaper that he'll spy under the groceries.
You'll be tired.
I'll say I am. I'm on the tramp looking for a job.
Well, won't you sit down, please, while I go on with our supper?
Oh, thank you.
Point-of-view shots sustain the camera's relationship with Hannah throughout this scene. But, as always, he's going to have to finagle a way to read that newspaper, so the actor in him comes out again. He strikes up a conversation with Margaret that reveals she really misses city life.
Did you ever see it?
No.
Oh, you should see
Hannah glances up at Margaret here as she tells her story, and his condescending and relatively amused reaction to her is apparent. But when she acknowledges that the bright lights of Glasgow are not there in the country, Hannah looks down and misses the true sadness on her face as she glances to frame left.
You miss them?
Sometimes.
Well, I've never been to Glasgow, but I've been to Edinburgh and
Hannah has now found his way to get to that paper. He's going to fill her with tales of the big cities he's been to and satisfy her dreams to know of such things. The crofter finds such places wicked, she tells him, so Hannah suggests that he speak to her of them privately. The camera focuses on his goal of getting to that paper and shows us Hannah's fixation through point-of-view shots.
They do, but they wouldn't if you were beside them.
At the exact moment Hannah compliments Margaret, the crofter enters, and Hitchcock cuts to an extraordinary shot, a reframing shot showing John's point of view that also contains him in profile. John has exposed the couple, and Hannah invents a quick cover story.
Is the supper ready, woman?
Do you mind if I have a look at your paper?
The upcoming dinner table conversation and camera work is worth studying. Every line that you will hear of John's blessing is associated through the cuts to specific framings, and every line of John's blessing interprets and is interpreted by the image on the screen.
You didn't tell me your name.
Oh, Hammond.
Well, Mr. Hammond, if you'll put down that paper, I'll say a blessing.
Yes, of course.
Sanctify these bounteous mercies to us miserable sinners. O Lord, make us truly thankful for them and for all thy manifold blessings.
Margaret immediately understands that Hannah is the murderer. John understands that his wife and Hannah have a special bond. John's jealousy consumes him.
Amen. Oh, mind, I forgot to lock the barn.
In a moment, Hitchcock is going to cut outside the house and follow John outside as he spies on Margaret and Hannah. We can easily imagine his interpretation of what they're saying from looking at John's face in a moment. John's imagination is an imagination of a particular sort. It's also one kind of viewing that the camera can show. It's voyeuristic, and it's filled with jealousy and pent-up rage and desire. The second portion of the Crofter's cottage scene sequence opens with a fade in on Margaret lying in bed. This shot marks a transition in the camera's attention to Hannah as our main character and emphasizes Margaret's special status in the world of the film. The Crofter's awake too, only out of hostility. Margaret hears the whistle first and knows intuitively Hannah's in danger. The shot of the vacant landscape with the police van coming up the road recalls the vacant landscape shots in the two earlier transition scenes. In a moment, just as Hannah is thanking Margaret, the crofter enters, accuses Margaret and Hannah of adultery and tells them to get out. Hannah rises to the moment and says he won't leave her with her husband thinking this. The shot in this sequence that is absolutely critical is a long-shot framing of Hannah, Margaret, and the crofter through the up and down bars of the back of a chair. Ironically, this framing hits the screen the moment Margaret tells Hannah, "It's your chance for liberty." The bars in the frame tell us that there is no freedom, and this close-up again shows us Hannah thinking.
You're all wrong about this. She's only trying to help me.
Aye, to bring shame and disgrace upon my house.
She was helping me to escape from the police. The police? It's the police. They're after me for murder.
What?
They're here. She was only trying to warn me. I had to tell her about it last night. Don't let them in. Say I'm not here. I'll make it with you a while.
How much?
£5.
Have you got that much?
Yes.
Give it to me.
What they've got.
When the crofter says he'll protect Hannay, Hannay believes him. The concluding images of this sequence, of Margaret in the foreground of the frame or alone in the frame, are among the most moving in the entire film. For when Hannay goes, her chance for happiness goes too. The worst part may be that she knows it, just as the worst part of her entrapment may be that she knows it too well. Margaret's innocence does not make her a dupe in the 39 steps. Indeed, everybody else, including Hannay, is a dupe and can be duped. This separates Margaret as a person from everybody else in the film, and Margaret's specialness is underscored by the camera's intimate relationship with her. Consider only the last shot of this sequence. This shot tells us that Margaret's hope for happiness left with Hannay. There is a real finality to that shot. Margaret is a tragic figure. Hannay is not. They live in different worlds, and those worlds met for a moment, and now the moment's over. The next scene is a police chase of Hannay over the hills of Scotland, and this whole scene anticipates the climactic scene on Mount Rushmore in North by Northwest. The landscape is vacant and surreal, an emptiness that dwarfs human beings on its surface. Of course, there's no abyss in this landscape. This means that one of the central concepts of Hitchcock's work overall is latent or embedded in Hitchcock's work of the 30s. The scenes parallel with or anticipation of the Mount Rushmore sequence in North by Northwest is maybe most clear in two shots of this chase, right here, where Hannay is shown climbing a rock mountain and skirting a rock formation. There are real differences between this scene and the climactic scene on Mount Rushmore. The differences are part of Hitchcock's maturation as an artist. For one thing, in North by Northwest, Thornhill and his romantic partner are together. Hannay is here alone, without anyone to rescue but himself. For another thing in this movie, the scene's not at the end, but in the middle. But the concept of human isolation, of finding oneself in a nowhere that is not conducive to inhabitation and in which one is tracked and exposed, remains. Even that funny, antiquated plane that hovers over Hannay can be understood to anticipate the plane in the crop duster sequence of North by Northwest. Hitchcock pauses the chase for this shot, another close-up of Hannay that announces his thinking. With Hannay's desperate arrival at the door of the manse, the chase music dies down, and we enter another scene that will call upon Hannay to improvise a performance. Here, he will, like Roger Thornhill in the cafeteria scene in North by Northwest, have to play dead. Like Hannay at this moment, we might assume that he's come to the end of his troubles and reached a safe haven. But nothing could be farther from the truth. The professor, whom we're about to meet, is one of a great line of Hitchcock characters who act as surrogate authors of the film we view. Cool, calm, collected, and diabolical, the professor doesn't tip his hand, literally, until he wants to. He has all the features of a good and dignified life. This is a Hitchcockian meditation on deception and on the theatricality of everyday life. Things and people are not necessarily who and what they appear to be.
Then we can talk. Come along in and meet my wife. Louisa, my dear, I've another guest for you. This is Mr. I forgot to ask your name.
Hammond.
Mr. Hammond. He's come to see me on business, all the way from London.
Yes, the police inspector.
The scene in the professor's drawing room is a tour de force of filmmaking. As William Rothman notes in Hitchcock, The Murderous Gaze, if you look at the scene closely, you'll realize that hands, the crucial locus of the professor's identifying mark, that missing portion of his little finger, are prominent in virtually every frame. The scene is also classically Hitchcockian. It places Hannay in a situation whose very formalities trap him. There's a wicked wit in such scenes. Consider the party with Strutt present in Marnie, and a terrible truth. Formalities are obstructions to truth in the world of a Hitchcock film. The professor returns and taps Hannay on the shoulder from outside the frame, leading with that hand with the damaged finger. Authorship is part of what the professor claims for himself when he asks Hannah to look out the window to the view and shows the police on a wild goose chase. The professor's remark, "we're rather proud of it," refers to his pride in getting the police to go away and producing the image we just viewed. Now again, the topic of murder is brought up jokingly and as entertainment, as in the scene with the salesman on the train. Once again, people speak of the murder and of capturing the murderer, and the alleged murderer is right under their noses. And don't forget to watch for all those hands.
The Professor wants his lunch.
There's no hurry, my dear. Still, if you must go. Pat, ring for Captain.
Now the camera tracks back with the departing company and family members and will reveal Hannah all alone in the rear of the frame, framed by the elaborate window curtains that invoke a stage, as indeed this very room will become a stage, as Van Damme says to Thornhill in the Townsend mansion scene in North by Northwest. When he re-enters the room, the professor makes a show of locking the door, and again, the camera does not reveal his secret.
Now, Mr. Hannay, I suppose it's safe to call you by your real name now?
The dynamic of this scene is power, and indeed, the professor's whole game is about his wish for power. When the professor turns from Hannah and claims a private moment, we see him in thought and not tipping his hand one more time. Now when, in a moment, the professor holds up his hand and Hitchcock cuts to a close-up shot of it and displays the missing finger, it's one of the most remarkable shots in the film and one of the funniest as well.
Which one?
This one, I think.
Sure it wasn't this one?
But this is a bad moment for Hannah, whose face falls when he views the hand. Donat's subtlety as an actor is nowhere more evident in this film than in this one shot, when his expression goes from open to stunned to masked by the wry or wary indifference we've seen on his face from the beginning. The professor is not pleased when his wife interrupts the little drama in the drawing room.
Well, Mr. Hannay,
now the scene becomes a battle of wits between the professor and Hannah. The professor assumes his superiority to Hannah, and Hannah is once again in a predicament he is going to have to escape from by improvising something. The point of view shot of the door shows us Hannah's idea forming. The enigma of the professor is sustained in this semi-profile framing of him, during which he calmly informs Hannah that his fake life cannot be exposed. Hannah quietly makes his way to the door, appearing lost in thought. Another point of view shot shows Hannah close to the door and ominously contains a globe that indicates the professor's wish for power.
I don't know what to think.
Hannah seems really close to escaping when the professor rises and cuts his progress short. There's another face-off between the two actors, during which Hannah reacts quite dramatically in a frontal medium shot to the news that the professor has the secrets after all. He rises and plays the moment as if everything were over.
Well, that's that.
Yes. What about it?
What about what?
But it's not over. The professor offers him the opportunity to kill himself on the spot. When the professor's wife enters the scene and doesn't react to the gun in the professor's hands, we're presented with one of the most startling moments in the film. Is she complicit with her husband's activities? Or does she hate everything about him so much that she no longer expresses her outrage? Or is she just playing a role and living within it? Close-up of Robert Donat's face is a masterstroke here. He's caught by the camera and by the professor and thinking. The point of view shot of the door shows us his plan and only hope. With a slight shrug, he moves toward the door. The gun is fired. We see Hannah's stunned expression and physical jolt. He collapses. The image fades out. Hannah's been overwhelmed, and he gives himself to fate here. We fade into a phallic upright hook and hear the horrible crofter press Margaret about his coat and prayer book. Off screen, we hear him start to beat her for giving Hannah these items. Does this scene occur in Hannah's head? Does he know the real cost of his freedom? For Hitchcock here tells us that the price of Hannah's freedom is Margaret, that she suffers because of him. This is the only scene in Hitchcock's work where real spousal abuse is indicated, albeit off screen. the immorality of the violence is clear. The police chief's callous laugh when he sees the bullet stuck in the hymnal only makes Margaret's suffering worse.
Well, it's a lesson to us all, Mr. Hannay, not to mix with doubtful company.
The globe in the background of the frame is the telling motif in the police chief's office. It links the chief with the professor. Through the close-up profile shot of the chief, Hitchcock informs us of this man's villainy and duplicity before narrative events do. The profile shot shows that the chief is acting. Hannay, living in the world of the film, can't tell this. We in the audience of the film benefit from the camera's ability to expose human beings. Once again, Hannay believes himself to be in a safe haven here, but realizes late that he's got to escape. When the chief reveals his true colors...
Are you wishing to see me, Sheriff?
Indeed I am. Do you think I enjoy playing...
The camera reframes quickly to Hannay, who stands stock still in a rage. The camera backs up and moves in a single flowing movement from a close shot to a full shot of Hannay. This camera movement expresses the brutality of Hannay's betrayal to the police. The camera's movement also expresses Hannay's isolation, and for the first time in the film, Hannay is genuinely angry.
Oh, that's easy. From one of your pursuers on the moor, isn't that so, Inspector?
It is so, sir. I had a shot at him myself.
I demand that you allow me to telephone to the High Commissioner for Canada in London.
You better do that from London. You'll be there soon enough.
The camera cuts outside the police station in a moment and reveals gunmen are still after Hannay. And suddenly, to our amazement, Hannay makes another miraculous exit, jumps out the window, and runs down the street.
My God!
Almost immediately, the film finds a new and happier mood as Hannay joins a marching band as it goes down the street. Once more, Hannay is seeking cover, only this time he has the telltale handcuffs on and has to work to camouflage them. The marching band offers another opportunity to escape detection in a formal setting and reveals Donut's remarkable ability to blend in, or nearly to do so, in spite of his light jacket and height. Soon, Hannay peels off from the band and scoots into an alley. Seeing himself surrounded by the police, hence trapped, he does the first thing that comes into his head. He enters the hall and is immediately identified as the guest speaker.
How do you do? We're all waiting for you. Pamela's got to meet you at the station.
Little does he know that this scene is going to provide him with the opportunity to make a real public performance.
Welcome this opportunity of discussing with you another question vital to the import of our country at this critical and momentous hour.
Inside this hall, Hitchcock pictures a quite different audience than we saw in the boisterous music hall. The crowd is passive, we might even say bored. The political speech scene that is about to start is one of the most hilarious improvisations Hannay performs in the whole film. It's hilarious that his introduction is so mumbled that no one can understand it.
His brilliant record as a soldier and statesman, son of Scotland, who
Speak
crossed the border and conquered England, and is now one of the foremost figures of the diplomatic and political world in the great city of London. I'm therefore going to ask you...
And it's hilarious that in a moment, everyone turns to look at Hannay as it dawns on him that he has to give the main speech.
By an adequate majority. I now ask for Captain Fraser.
Hannay's opening remarks are both literally and metaphorically true, hence a piece of brilliant double-edged writing and acting.
Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for my hesitation in rising just now, but to tell you the simple truth, I'd entirely failed while listening to the chairman's flattering description of the next speaker to realize he was talking about me. As for you, may I say from the bottom of my heart and with the utmost sincerity...
In a point-of-view shot, the camera reveals that the plot is thickening. Pamela enters the hall with the real guest speaker in tow. Shock and dismay fill her face as she recognizes Hannay on the dais.
Relieved because so long as I stand on this platform, I'm delivered from the moment from the cares and anxieties which must always be the lot of a man in my position. When I journeyed up to Scotland...
It turns out that Donat is fully capable of giving an excellent and rousing speech. He emerges here as a masterful performer. This is all the more impressive when one knows that Robert Donat had an illness, a symptom of which was that he would shake, which made it difficult for him to sustain long takes. What we see in this sequence of the political rally is that no one in the film is as gracious, easygoing, or comfortable with the camera's gaze as Robert Donat. He's neither self-conscious before the camera nor unself-conscious. Robert Donat is a perfect film actor.
You as one destined to make no uncertain mark in politics. In other words, your future member of Parliament, your candidate, Mr. McCrocodile.
Does he know the candidate's name?
I know your candidate will forgive my referring to him by the friendly nickname by which he's already known in anticipation, mark you, at Westminster. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to discuss some topic. What shall it be?
The herring fishery.
Unemployment.
Hanne's performance now is reminiscent of Mr. Memories, in that he accepts all topics thrown to him by the audience and runs with them. But this high-angle shot is ominous. And the thugs viewing him show us why.
Helpless, and I have the whole world against me. And those are things that no man or woman ought to feel. And
Hanne ends up giving a speech about human freedom and peace and harmony that no one could object to, and he appears to speak his mind freely.
Where no neighbor plots against neighbor, where there is no persecution or hunting down, where everybody gets a square deal and a sporting chance, and where people try to help and not to hinder. A world from which suspicion and cruelty and fear have been forever banished. That is the sort of world I want. Is that the sort of world you want?
Hanne tries to escape now by entering the crowd, but fails because the crowd swarms him and pushes him back into the hands of his enemies. The camera cuts to a high-angle shot and again shows him trapped in the world of the film. The gunman's hand enters the frame and seals that Hanne will not escape the film yet.
I kept them going as long as I could for you.
Well, you're certainly a difficult man to follow.
Well, I suppose you think you've been damn clever.
Officer, will you tell your prisoner not to insult me,
You
please?
try and stop
You
me.
come along with me.
Couldn't you realize I was speaking the...
Hanne and Pamela pick up where they left off. She's furious, and he's pleading with her to see that he was desperate and was telling the truth.
An enormously important secret is being taken out of this country by a foreign agent. I can't do anything myself because of this fool of a detective. Has that penetrated?
Right to the funny bone. Now tell me another one.
But the conversation between Hanne and Pamela has a new tone. It's begun to sound like the banter of the Hollywood romantic comedies of the 30s and 40s, where intimate arguments take place, and where one of the marks of intimacy is the ability to respond comically or with wit, and at a certain pace. In recognition of his great performance, Hanne receives a standing ovation from the crowd and waves back to them. He even shows the handcuffs he's wearing. At this moment, we know that the film is going to have a good ending, that Hanne's going to survive, and that his ability to perform is going to see him through. Pamela, played by Madeleine Carroll, is one of the women in the history of film who is clearly capable of romantic comedy and the banter that identifies it. Like Katharine Hepburn, Irene Dunne, Barbara Stanwyck, Rosalind Russell, Madeleine Carroll is distinctive on screen.
Inverary?
Yes.
She's not only quick, she's smart. And she's not only smart, she's opinionated. She has a mind and will of her own.
I'll see you're sent back at the earliest possible moment.
The romance between Hanne and Pamela is in stark contrast to the other marriages we've seen in the film. But the 39 Steps isn't a romantic comedy like the Philadelphia Story, largely because the plot remains fixed on the man's problems and within the form of a Hitchcock thriller. This shot places us and our characters, again in a vast and vacant landscape, and recalls the chase scene that brought us to the professor's house and to the crofter's cottage. When we return to the car, we'll see that Hanne has retreated to his mask of wry or wary skepticism.
I'm going the wrong way. That's the way down to the south. Surely that's the way to Inverary.
There's a bridge fallen down on that road, miss.
This upcoming close-up reveals his thinking and the mask of skepticism.
Shut your mouth. You'll see it soon enough when we get to the station.
In this repeat of the setup, Hannay begins to whistle the tune we heard with Memory's Act.
Would you like to have a small bet with me, Pamela? All right, I'll have it with you, Sherlock. I'll lay you 100 to 1 that your sheriff principal is the top joint of his little finger missing. What about it? I win.
Now comedy takes over.
Oh, it's a whole flock of detectives.
Why Memory's tune entered Hannay's head a moment before, we can only guess at. Maybe it's dawned on him to count on himself in the world of the film.
I'll soon fix that.
The fake police handcuff Pamela to Hannay, and the gesture unmistakably represents that they're now married.
Yes, and as long as I go, you go. Come on.
Hannay's remark that whither he goest, she goest, and later his remark to the effect that whither he liest, she liest, when they arrive at the country inn, resonate with the knowledge that they are married. But they're also not married, and they're going to have to undo this fake marriage, this theatrical marriage, in order to achieve a real marriage. Most of what the couple does from this moment on becomes part of the process of undoing their fake or theatrical marriage. Like the couple at the end of North by Northwest, whose adventure together in the film frees them to marry authentically, Hannay and Pamela are chased through a hostile, vacant landscape. The fact that they're handcuffed together leads to classical comic moments and bits of business. They get caught on this fence rail, and Hannay has to untangle himself, reverse course, and join her, crawling underneath the fence. This is a moment where he gives up the lead and follows hers. Much of what they do in this sequence in order to earn their escape, while serious, is also playful, and their comic sketches are in part games. Pamela is mostly dragged along on this journey. To keep her quiet, Hannay sticks something he calls a gun against her while they hide under the waterfall. This indication of his capacity for violence is real. He recognizes the reality of the threat posed by the thugs chasing them, and she doesn't. But since Hannay's gun is actually a pipe, his threat is also not real.
There's nobody down here, I tell you.
Come up here, blast you, and don't waste any more time. Spread out and find them.
The scene fades in on them walking down a peaceful country road, and the mood of the film changes once again. Being on the road forces them to find a way of walking together and a way of talking together.
What chance have you got tied for me?
Keep that question for your husband. Meanwhile, I'll admit you're the white man's burden.
I know, and I can't tell you what comfort that thought gives me. I say, what is the use of all this? Those policemen will get you as soon as it's daylight.
They may get me, but they're not police.
Their banter sustains their argument about whether Hannay is or not trustworthy, is or is not a murderer, and so places Hannay once again in the position of improvising scenarios that satisfies Pamela's view of him as a villain.
Women in this island, and I've got to be chained to you. Now, look here, listen, once more. I'm telling you the truth. I told it to you once in the train last week. I tried to tell you after the election meeting this evening. I'm telling it to you now for the third time. There's a dangerous conspiracy against this island, and we're the only people who can stop it. Think what you've seen happen right under your very nose.
The gallant knight to the rescue.
All right. Then I'm just a plain, common murderer. who stabbed an innocent, defenseless woman in the back not 4 days ago. How do you come out over that?
I don't know how innocent you may be, but you're a woman and you're defenseless and you're alone on a desolate moor in the dark, manacled to a murderer who'd stop at nothing to get you off his hands. If that's the situation you prefer, have it, my lovely, and welcome.
I'm not afraid of it.
The only critical moment when his acting appears to border on true violence is when he grabs her collar and, speaking harshly, seems on the verge of strangling her.
Now on to every single thing I tell you to do, and do it quick.
You big bully.
I like your pluck. Come on.
By now, we know, and she knows, and Hannah knows, that she doesn't really think he's a villain, and that the pretense that she doesn't trust him will eventually vanish. But what's going to make it vanish?
Penetrated the ivory dough.
Only just.
All right, pull yourself together. Now put your hand in my pocket and look as though you're in a hurry. Come on.
They come upon a quaint country inn, and Hannah devises another performance, one in which they pretend to be a married couple. Our view that the world of the film has taken an upward swing is affirmed when we see that the inn is managed by one of the most happily married and cutest old couples in the history of film. Hannah perpetuates his villain act and persists in the pretense that he has a gun in one pocket and he'll use it if Pamela steps out of line. Her outrage is real in this scene. We don't have to question that. But it's also not real. That is, it's part of her act, her resistance to acknowledging that she knows him to be a good fellow. Does she really respond to his threats with the gun? She's already called him just a big bully, which indicates she's not too afraid. Or is she threatened by the prospect of a more intimate relationship with him, that is, of a sexual threat to her that might happen once they're in the bedroom?
Off we go. Mr. and Mrs. Henry Hopkinson, the Hollyhocks, Hammersmith.
Hannah's improvisation of their married name cannot but remind one of Shaw's Pygmalion, in which Henry Higgins teaches Eliza how to pronounce her H's. And that play is one of the great sources of the comedies of marriage in Hollywood of the 1930s. Once Hannah and Pamela enter the room, more comedy ensues, largely because of the handcuffs, which prematurely tie them together in a faux marriage. Again, we view comic bits of business with her skirt, prompted by the fact that they are stuck together. And again, their gestures blend seriousness with a sense of game playing, reality with theater.
Now, dearie, off with that wet skirt of yours, and I'll have it dried in the kitchen.
Oh, don't bother. It'll dry in front of the fire just as well, thanks all the same.
No doubt the gentleman will take care of you. Good night, sir. Good night, Mother.
Good night.
Pamela's outburst at the door supports the idea that she's frightened of a sexual relationship with Hannah. This means that we can see his gun, his fake gun, as a form of sexual threat and phallic. But throughout this scene, while we don't doubt Hannah's masculinity or interest in Pamela, we can also see that Hannah, or just Robert Donat on film, is a gentleman. He's an unusual male character in Hitchcock's work in this sense.
Come in.
This scene provides us with shots of Pamela and Hannah in close-up and together in the frame. The upcoming shot shows that Hannah is acting, his expression is plastic, and he's grinning artificially. She's pained. He silences her with a jab from his fake gun and persists in the story that they're a runaway couple. And for the second time in the film, he's believed. Here, though, it's his fiction that's believed, where Margaret had known the truth. But there's also a twist. For the fiction that he and Pamela are a runaway couple is not just a fiction. This couple really is in love. And even though the old woman's interpretation of their actions is comical on one level, it's also true. The funniest and yet the most serious piece of business ensues when Hannah and Pamela sit down on the bench together to eat.
Now, what's the next item on the program?
Get these things
Right.
off.
How are we going to set about it?
Hannah's remark about what's the next item on the program overtly sustains the music hall pace of the whole movie. The slight high-angle framing reveals an ominous edge to their predicament.
Comfortable as possible. What about that skirt of yours? It's still pretty damp, you know. Don't want to be tied to a pneumonia case on top of everything else. Take it off, I don't mind.
I shall keep it on.
All of Hannah's remarks here indicate that this movie is moved from a drama with seriousness to a comedy of errors. When Pamela starts to take off her stockings, the sexual tension between them comes to the fore. Hannah's limp hand tracking down her leg is genuinely comical. But it's even funnier in the next moment when she shoves her sandwich into his hand. With this gesture, she takes control of their sexual situation. Hannah's quite delightful, "Oh yes," in response to her command that he hold this, and not her leg, that is a straight-faced acknowledgement on his part that he's not going to overwhelm her sexually.
Thank you.
Don't mention it. Do you like your milk now?
No, thank you. I'll wait a little.
All right. Cheerio.
When the moment comes for them to get into bed, Hannah characteristically becomes theatrical.
Now, will you kindly place yourself on the operating table? All right, nobody's going to hurt you. This is Armistice Day. Let's get some rest while we can.
I'm not going to lie on this bed.
So long as you're chained to me, you'll lie wherever I lie. We're the Siamese twins.
Oh, don't blow.
Hannah's little speech here reveals that he knows what should happen or could happen on this bed between them, but he's not going to engage in making it happen. She has to trust him.
Thank you. There I go again. I wish I could get that damn tune out of my head. I wonder where I heard it.
You sound very sleepy.
Sleepy, I'll say so. Do you know when I last slept in a bed? Saturday night, whenever that was. Then I only got a couple of hours.
What made you wake so soon? Dreams?
What do you mean, dreams?
I've always been told murderers have terrible dreams.
Oh, but only at first. Got over that a long time ago.
Hannah's next to last great made-up story in the film is his story that he's a mass murderer, that he comes to it through a family line and fully expects to be ensconced in Madame Tussauds upon his death.
Away like most of us, pilfering pennies from other children's lockers at school, then a little pocket picking, then a spot of car pinching.
This story finally makes Pamela laugh. And it's the first sign of her softening, the first indication she gives that she likes this man and trusts him.
Madame Tussauds and point me out.
Which section?
Oh, it's early to say. I'm still young. But I'll be
Most
there all right
importantly, Robert Donat can make her laugh. And that's the sign, the sure sign, of a good marriage in this period of Hollywood film.
Pinching my wrist with his handcuff.
Oh, sorry. Talking of Madame Tussauds, that's how it all began.
What began?
My career of crime. All hereditary. Great-uncle Penruddock.
Who was he?
My good girl, where were you brought up? Never heard of my great-uncle Penruddock, the Cornish Bluebeard? Got it all from him.
I thought your family came from Canada.
No, that's where they went, after the Penruddock incident. Yet he murdered 3 wives and got away with it, but his third mother-in-law got the goods on him and tried to have him arrested.
One of the sweetest parts of the 39 Steps is that Hannah's tale becomes a bedtime story here. The camera closes in and focuses on him as he's lost in the improvisation. As he sort of staggers through to an end of his tale, he glances at Pamela, and the camera reframes. She's already nodded off. The moment for any sexual advance is gone. He's put her to sleep with his story. Handcuffed together, forced into marriage, they displaced the adult world of sexuality by inhabiting a world of childhood together. Not all of Hitchcock's heroes or heroines are capable of this achievement. The scene ends on an image of a candle burning. There's little mistaking this as a phallic object, hence as a representation of Hannah's desire. We cut away now to a brief scene of the professor leaving the mansion. I see this scene as theatrical, that is to say fake. It seems as staged as can be and reminds me of the front porch scene in Marnie when Sean Connery instructs Tippi Hedren on how wives say goodbye to their husbands in the morning. The professor's departure is a drill, and rather than a poignant scene that convinces us he has a loving family, I think this scene informs us that the professor has no feelings. We cut back to Pamela and Hannah. When she wakes up in a moment, she manages to accomplish what he had not been able to. She extricates herself from the handcuffs. Doing this surely displays her strength and resourcefulness, but it also reveals that their fake marriage now can be shed, now can be undone. When she removes the handcuff, Pamela divorces Hannah. It's a comical but auspicious sign that the minute the handcuffs are off, Hannah makes his first move toward her. When she gets up, she checks his pocket and discovers that his gun is actually only a pipe. The phallic threat is gone. But the fake gun was only a surrogate threat in the first place. Both gun and pipe are phallic symbols. Exasperated, she gathers her things and prepares to leave him forever. When Pamela leaves the room in a moment, she believes she's putting Hannah and all that happened between them behind her. She still doesn't believe his story, and she still hasn't recognized the depth of his real feeling for her or of her feeling for him. Hannah did woo her violently and reveal the actual threat of male sexuality to her on the train. He frightened her. But on their adventure in the country and in the hotel room, Hannah revealed his gentleness and his considerateness, and most importantly, his capacity for fun. Is this enough for Pamela to forgive him, his initial act? The composition in the hallway is classically Hitchcockian. Up and down lines fill the background of the frame and reveal panic or threat, and so sustain the tension of the film as a thriller. The little scene on the balcony is chiefly a scene of Pamela's transformation, and it takes place chiefly between her and Hitchcock's camera. The close-ups of her that we will see shortly, alone, listening to the conversations below, tell us, to be sure, that she's listening and figuring out that Hannah has been truthful all along.
Well?
But these very close shots of Madeleine Carroll have a softness of focus that allows us to see her fully, her beauty, her intelligence, her tenderness. For the first time in the film, her defenses against Hannah and against the camera have vanished.
Half a crown.
And the phone call?
Oh, we'll see a shilling.
Is this a hotel as well?
Aye.
I mean, do you have people staying here?
Aye.
I suppose you get a few odd people at this time of the year?
Oh, aye.
You didn't happen to have anyone in tonight, did you?
Aye.
They weren't by any chance a young couple, were they?
James!
After the old lady throws out the thugs and protects the lovers, Pamela smiles and returns to the hotel room, changed.
Out, the pair of you. And dinna let on to anybody that you got to drink here after hours. Oh. You old fool, you. You wouldn't have give away a young couple, would you?
Inspired by her dawning of feeling, romantic music swells up now. Hitchcock soon will give us another close-up of Madeleine Carroll as she smiles down on the sleeping Hannah. Now we know for the first time that she and Hannah really are made for each other. In a tender gesture, she covers him with the blanket. But life isn't simple. Now she realizes she's cold. And since they're not yet really married, and that means she's not about to re-enter that fake marriage or that bed, she has a problem. She's decided to stay in this relationship with this man. But she asserts herself and takes back the blanket she so tenderly had put over him. This is a real marriage, after all. We fade in on a shot of the half-empty handcuffs, and the camera returns to Hanne's subjectivity. We see him smile as he appreciates that Pamela has escaped. His expression is one of sweet regret.
Good morning.
This shot of Pamela, looking directly at Hanne, is a forthright declaration of her commitment to him and their relationship.
I got a mine last night and came and camped out here.
Why didn't you run away?
I did, but just as I was going, I discovered that you'd been speaking the truth. So I decided to stay.
May I ask what earthquake caused your brain to work at last?
Those two men were in here last night. I overheard them telephoning.
What did they say?
Oh, a lot of stuff about the 39 steps.
You don't... No, go on.
And someone's going to warn them. How can you warn steps?
Never mind, go on.
Oh, yes, and there was another thing. Someone's got scared and is clearing...
Pamela divulges all these clues of the mystery that she learned the night before and apologizes for not believing him. But this first sweet conversation between Pamela and Hanne ends in an amazing fight. He's infuriated that she let the thugs get away, and she yells back at him. Their first morning together ends with her slamming a door in a justifiable huff.
Well, we ought to get a move on. What room are those two men in?
No room. They went as soon as they telephoned.
They what?
Didn't I tell you?
You let them go after hearing what they said. You button-headed little idiot.
Don't talk to me like that.
4 or 5 precious hours wasted. Why didn't you wake me up at once? Even you might have realized that what they said was important.
Well, now they've called these men off. Why not let well alone?
Let well alone? My good girl, I'm accused of murder. Can't you realize the only way I can clear myself is to expose these spies?
You still can. The man's going to the London Palladium.
Really? First house or second house? I'll get there 5 hours late.
Fine. The show will just about suit you.
What's that?
Crazy month.
We cut to this city's street scene, and now we've made yet another transition. We're back in London, and all the threads of the plot are going to come together.
You're quite right, madam. It's true the Air Ministry has got a new thing.
We find Pamela seeking help at Scotland Yard, but finding none. As usual in Hitchcock's films, the police are both unhelpful and deceptive.
Since you phoned to us from Scotland this morning, we've made the minutest inquiries.
It's obvious I'm wasting my time here.
Now, just a moment, miss, please. There's one thing you haven't told us. Where's Richard Hanne?
I haven't the faintest idea.
Now, look here, miss, you can't... You're in the telephone book, aren't you?
Yes.
Well, if anything cropped up, we'll give you a ring. That'll be all now. Thank you. Tell Archer and Seagrave to get another taxi and follow that girl. She'll lead us to Hanne, all right.
This sign returns us to the very opening moments of the film where we saw the music hall sign. And we're right to feel, in a sense, that we've come right back where we started. In many ways, the scene we're about to see is a classic Hitchcockian climactic scene. It builds, shot by shot, suspensefully, and finally brings every element of the plot together. The police are coming, we're back in the theater, Pamela is searching for Hanne, Hanne is trying to save his name. The timing of these shots can remind one of the enormously refined timing of the Albert Hall sequence in the 1950s, Man Who Knew Too Much.
Gentlemen, shall now sing.
Hitchcock really loves the theater, and one of his great subjects is film's difference from theater. Hitchcock loves people's appreciation of theater and their laughter at what goes on stage. But the theater to Hitchcock is also a mask, a world of unreality that needs to be exposed and unmasked. And this, in Hitchcock's view, is film's job, the art of film's task, to reveal reality and remove the mask of theater. This scene builds and builds as everyone begins to convene on the same stage. Before Pamela arrives, Hannah is about to make an enormous discovery on his own, though.
She's seen him. She's on her way down to the store. Now, sir.
Which of those characters is in costume and which isn't? Hannah starts peering around, wondering what he's looking for, trying to figure out why he's there. All of a sudden, he catches sight of the professor hiding in the balcony box. Grabbing the binoculars that now function as a surrogate camera, he gets a close-up view of the professor's hand, and we see the missing portion of the little finger.
What are you doing? Listen, I found him. He's up in that box.
You can't do anything.
Pamela is a lot more despairing at this moment than Hannah. He knows he's on the verge of something, but not quite there. Characteristically, Hitchcock cuts away a bit to build suspense. The next shot is one of the last shots we see of Hannah thinking. He needs one more clue. The whole plot's not yet clear. Donat's expression is now completely devoid of the indifference with which he started the film. He's concentrating when a near miracle occurs, a sure sign of Hitchcock's authorship and presence. The Mr. Memory music comes back up.
Now I know where I heard it before. Of course, that music hall. Annabella's...
Ladies and gentlemen, with your kind attention and permission, I have now the honor to present to you one of the most remarkable men in the world.
It's the same little man.
Every day he commits the memory.
Once again, Hannah is going to use a surrogate camera, the binoculars, to put the whole plot together in a single, close-up, reframing shot that links memory and the professor.
And millions of them down to the smallest detail. Test him, ladies and gentlemen. Ask him any question.
I've got it. Of course there are no papers missing. All the information's inside memory's head.
Hannah now knows everything. He's fathomed the mystery of this Hitchcock film. But as always, when a character figures out the world of a Hitchcock film, what's really going on, he finds himself alone in that world. The challenge that remains for Hannah is characteristically and deeply Hitchcockian.
You, Richard Hannah?
Listen, there's something you ought to know.
Keep Hannah. Come along, quiet.
Yes, but look...
Hannah is going to have to enter memory's performance and penetrate the world of the stage with reality.
What are the 39 steps?
The shocking angular shot of memory that follows shows him entering a trance, and unable to stop himself, he recites the answer to Hannah's question. This horrific angled shot of memory, with its vivid up and down lines filling the back of the frame, signals his tragedy and his doom. In a wonderful climactic event, the professor, a perfectly theatrical character, is surrounded on the stage and comes to his unhappy but just end. Hitchcock's authorship is singled out by that high-angle shot.
Keep your seats. Keep your seats.
But once again, as in the beginning, the show must go on. We cut to backstage, where memory is going to die, with a background of chorus-line girls dancing. He's going to confess the big secret to Hannah and Pamela. It's hard to watch him die. This man's memory is his tragic flaw, and he leaves this world after invoking his own famous closing line, "Am I right, sir?" to Hannah. In a few moments, Hannah and Pamela back up, as does the camera, as memory fades away. And Hannah and Pamela take one another's hands. Their romance is forged in the face of death. We can't call this a perfectly happy ending. Indeed, Hitchcock ironizes the ending. He allows us to identify his film with the theater and the showpiece that runs behind memory's death. We, too, can think of Hitchcock's films as mere entertainments, the way the audience in the theater is thinking of what's happening on the stage. They've already forgotten memory.
Am I right, sir?
But we don't have to. We can take a deeper look at Hitchcock's work and understand that it's far more than mere entertainment. Hitchcock's resolution of the romantic relationship between Hannah and Pamela, a happy ending, occurs not in a comic world unequivocally committed to happiness and love, but in a world filled with deception, hunger for power, secrets, murder, and death. That is to say, the world of a Hitchcock film.